Okay, today I want to discuss what fractals are because it seems to be a conflict between Dan Winter, who I respect a great deal, and Nissim Harriman, who I've grown to love. First, I'd like to have you watch Dan Winter's .com video. Uh, it has a lot of good geometric analysis in it, and there are plenty of good questions there. He's strong on how all this works from electrical aspects, as he is an electrical engineer in background. But he's moved on to some pretty heavy duty stuff in terms of fractals. And so that's what we're going to discuss. I see some problems in his what he says, basically from what we've learned. So let me expand on his fractals, DNA, and golden ratio, which he discusses at length. First, I suggest that before you even get into this, I'd like to suggest that his idea of curing cancer is, in my opinion, incorrect. But what he's doing is he's talking about curing cancer from a mainstream aspect. And I've talked about this on other tapes and also written about it in my books. And the problem is caused by what we call cancer, or what we assume cancer is. And I say that cancer is not what we assume it is. I say it's a reaction to external toxins, and it's actually a way that the body tries to save itself, and I've said that a lot of times. So it's a necessary way of preserving your body's life by changing its cells so as to encapsulate them and allow them to run on sugar. So it's not working on the normal methods that the cells use to use energy, and I'll talk about energy in a minute. But so I said, cancer then is just another way to keep us alive as long as possible, because the body wants to keep you alive as long as possible. That's its job, and we got a lot of cells here, a lot of things going on, and preservation is not just about this overall thing, but it's about a whole lot of things. You are a whole biological entity that's way beyond what anybody assumed a few years ago. And I say it's and I said this in my first book. It's liver overload. The liver can no longer handle the problem with toxins, so it sends it to encapsulate it in other places. Obviously, this is not a particularly mainstream way of looking at things, but this is how I see it, and I believe it's true. So it starts with cellular intelligence and cellular alienation. So we're talking about sending toxins to encapsulated places. Unlike calling it a disease, as Dan and the others do, and Dan talks about how he can save people or cure people of cancer, and I say there's no such thing as a cancer cure, because cancer is not a disease; it's a condition. Now, so that means that if you're going to try to cure somebody, or if you're going to try to save somebody of cancer, what you really got to do is to get the toxins out of their body. And I've talked about that a lot too. And the toxins are one of the ways to easily get rid of toxins is to take a whole lot of MSM, which I advocate and have advocated for many years. So the life extending effect of cancer is complicated and hidden by the treatment that modern medicine uses to fight it. So because modern medicine's methods are actually not life extending, they're life suspending eventually. They all virtually every treatment that we have will kill you if done long enough. However, one of the things I suggest is that without cancer, people would die immediately when they're exposed to high levels of toxins, as we are so often today. Always have been exposed to toxins on occasion, and cancer's always been around since we've kept records. So the very same things that we say cause cancer cause this condition to occur, but it's really what I'm saying here is that it's not the condition that we attribute. Cancer is a life-saving and it's necessary. You're not going to get rid of it until you get rid of the toxins. One of the now moving on here. One of the most interesting parts of Dan Winter's talk is his nesting analogy of perfect sharing, and you got to love it. Also, his talks about how the heart works and how the heart thinks, because my friend Rich and I have been talking about how the organs in general have certain intelligence to them, and certainly the heart would be the most intelligent of all of them. Liver, at least the second, but now that's a fight, because the liver is you could think of the liver as a processing plant, and the heart as the place where we basically come about and use love. So they're quite different in their aspects that way. In terms of how they work, the heart is a pretty simple thing, and it's always, if you look at modern medicine, it's basically a pump, and I often call it that, even though it's a lot more than a pump, and it's becoming more obvious in some people like Dan's work, that it's a whole lot more than a pump. But we've been talking about heart centers for at least 15,000 years, so it's not new information. It's just new ways of measuring it. So one of the things I like also about what Dan talks about is that his ability, when he talks about people's ability to die. And I recently reported on my having helped my brother across in his death. Some of the things I learned, and I learned a lot in that. I was perfectly awake, and so was my brother as we did that. So it was a really interesting experience for me, and one that taught me a new level, which was nice. Now, next thing that Dan talks about is the slinky idea, and that's pretty powerful too. I know most people here have at least played with slinkies, but what I'm suggesting from that is that we're on the verge of getting into multiple slinkies. And so we're going to have a whole lot of slinkies embedded in each other. So when you pull them apart, they're going to be a lot more intricate and a lot more stable than they are now. So I'm talking about DNA. And DNA is going to change. It's going to be one of the most obvious physical changes that goes on in this new golden era age that we're getting ready to go into. It's going to be a pretty fast transition, as I see it, and it's going to happen probably within the next 5 to 10 years. We're going to go through a transformation that's going to be more than incredible as the Anunnaki return here, as I reported earlier, and start working with everybody again and get us back into sync, and so the world doesn't get ruined by things like atomic energy plants sinking into the ocean and some form of nuclear war. So moving on. So this will result this change that's going to come about will also result in the replication of mitochondria per cell and number of mitochondria per cell. Also, by increasing the telomere length that you're born with, and it will result in life extending characteristics. Now, you might think this is kind of crazy, but the fact is that Rich can already do this. He does it using the same fractal stacks that I'm talking about here, and why I don't agree with Dan on this particular aspect. But I like his Dan's analysis of, and I'm speaking of Dan Winters now because this is going to get kind of tricky. I'm going to be talking about other Dans. But Dan's analysis of how DNA is braided and turns on is really good and intuitive, and you got to like what he says. And again, his heart harmonics work with which is basically like the black hole that Nissim Harriman talks about. In other words, it goes like this, and at the center of this thing is, I say, God, but it's not really God. It's an aspect of God. But we'll go on with that in a minute. Now, we talk about. He talks about soul, and soul is basically you, but it's an overall also you, and it doesn't work within time and space. So even though you do, we can just become soul and become soul aware, or self-aware, if you will, and we get in that when we get to that ability, we become superluminal, as Dan talks about, and beyond light speed. There isn't any speed. If there's no speed, then there's no such thing as light speed. So when time and space have no merit, neither do light speed or any other notion of speed, as to say that in another way. When Dan Winter understands this, that is that the fifth dimension is timeless, then we'll be on the same page. Fractal geometry, all right, correctly organized using 2D fractals, as Dan Nelson, as I've talked about quite a bit before, and he has his several talks on the web about it, especially about his water. He understands 2D fractals well, and my friend Rich went to his lecture, got on to what he was doing, and we've changed him quite a bit. And we've created healing effects that are certainly beyond anything that I've ever seen, and probably beyond anything that Dan Winter could visualize, because the healings that these things create are almost instantaneous. It can be instantaneous, but they're certainly very, very fast. And things like cancer and most any other disease you can think about, really, it becomes just. So going back to what Dan Winter said about heart harmonics working in a vortex, I agree with totally. As I do that Nissan Harriman's idea that it's a black hole, because it virtually has that spin that I showed you a while ago, talked about a while ago, or two spins like this. And the heart is virtually a vortex creating muscle, and it flows blood in a vortex. So it makes the whole body a vortex in a sense, and that whole idea that the heart doesn't work like we assumed for so many years as a pump that just creates pumping motion is totally incorrect. And this vortex is in a perfect golden ratio, which is pretty cool. Okay, moving on. So the fractal geometry that we use is 2D instead of 3D, and it's wrapped around a hollow core, and that core makes it sort of 3D, but it's not. It's still 2D in context. And this was developed. I don't know that Dan Nelson developed it first, but he certainly uses it well. And Rich picked it up in Toronto, as I reported earlier, and we developed it further. So what it does is it changes the vortex into healing creating effects more than normal. Obviously there's quite a bit of healing going on with or without what we're doing, but when they get out of whack, these 2D fractals push it back into sync, and everything starts to work well. I would say, and I don't know this for sure, but there's no way I would, that what my friend Dr. Rich Price is doing is probably the only thing done like this on this planet currently at this level, that is using these 2D fractals with this degree of efficiency. The reason is that he's guided by inner masters, and most everybody else doesn't have an awareness like that, so they can't, and neither does Dan Nelson or Dan Winter. Doesn't mean that they're not guided by people, because they are, but the conversation is immediate between what Rich is doing and these inner masters like Angel Gabriel and some others. He can work with them immediately, right on, just as if I'm sitting here talking to you. So the point of this whole thing is that Dan's idea that his various shapes, that Nissan Harriman's shapes are not fractals, I say is wrong, and his idea that he has nailed God as a electrical component, as he talks about on one of his videos, is not only ridiculous, but it's naive, because if you've experienced God, you know God is a lot more than any electrical notion. Hey, I've used the analogy that God is electrical in the past. People that study Eckankar do that, but it's a lot more than that. It's a whole lot more than that, and the love that comes out of that space is it can't be described. So to say that God is represented by electrical qualities is a crude approximation, and it has some merits, but it's nowhere near what God is. Also, the universal vacuum, I say, is not a fractal in itself, as Don Winter talks about. However, the tetrahedron that Dan talks about, I say, or not Dan, as Nissan talks about, is a fractal, and we use that in 2D in ours. So it makes sense that it doesn't make any sense that it's not. So what I'm saying here really is that Dan's wave field perspective and background in electrical engineering appears to have taken his imagination a bit too far. Not that it isn't good. All right. So, and also I'm saying that Nissim Harriman's work, as I've seen it, and as Rich has watched it, and actually he turned me on to Nissim Harriman, does not conflict with his work, and what Rich does works both on cars, probably works on every kind of machine, and it certainly works on people in every case when they're out of sync. So I say he's gone too far, and no longer explains the obvious success results that we've seen firsthand. All right, so next major topic here is energy conversion and how that relates to aging. Now, I've said in the past, and I'm sure this is true right now, that mainstream doctors have us pegged at what they've seen, and they basically we have a norm, and that's what they expect, and so everything is judged on that norm, and I'm saying the norm is wrong. What we've got is a results of some really shoddy medicine that has limited people's lifespans in many ways, and so we're judging everything on what their limited information has been over the last at least probably 500 years, maybe 1,500 years, but I also say that that people are going to live when we get this right, and we get the medicine out of the limited hands that it's in now, and into the what they were doing during the previous golden age. When we get it out of their hands, the people will live 800 years, or certainly 600, and certainly a lot longer than 120. So one of the things I want to talk about now is one of the aspects of that we look at when people grow old. And I had a guy do this try to test me on this a few months ago, and he walked up to me and he said, "Shake my hand," because I told him about my books and whatever, and he said, "Oh, pretty good," because my hand wasn't shaking. Well, That's one of the ways we judge age. So, how do mainstream scientists and doctors attribute this problem that people get? They call it. They don't know. First off, they don't have a real reason. What they say when they finally get done is that it's their brains going, I don't know, calcifying or whatever, and genetics. And then they finally say it's a normal part of aging, and I say it's not either one. And to take it further, they even call it the tremors that you get essential tremors. And you go on the web and search essential tremors, and that's what you'll find. They're not essential. I'm saying that they're not even necessary or in any way a part of it of being the ages that people get these in. And what they're doing is they're getting characteristics of medicine, drugs that we take commonly. We're getting mixed medicines that have never been tested together. Some people are taking as many as 6 and 8 and 10, and certainly nobody's ever tested how they work together or what their effects will be. And one of the obvious things that happens is that when you get strange mixes, you get tremors. I don't know that people didn't have tremors before the real drug thing came in, but we also didn't have some of the things that I'm talking about here to counterbalance them. And one of the things that happens as people get into their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s is that their movement is restricted, and it causes them to fall, as they say on TV. I've fallen, I can't get up. And it's also linked to Parkinson's and migraines. Now, realize that if you can find an expert on migraines, it's always the person that has them. And I suffered from migraines from age 12, when I first started to reach puberty. And I had them all the way up until I started getting heavy on high-level MSM. So to say that it's got anything to do with aging is incredibly wrong. Parkinson's could be a disease, but I doubt it. It's probably more age-related. Again, medicine-related, diet-related. Our food is not grown properly anymore. It's grown with artificial fertilizers, and it's devoid of the nutrients that we need. Okay, moving on. Let's see here. Metabolism. Metabolism is the key to wellness. It's also certainly related to anti-aging and this issue that I talk about, life extension, that nobody else really has gotten into yet, but they will. As we start to see people age well beyond the normal, what we called normal for the last 300 years. Now, I say 300 years because people, once they got past childhood diseases, have always lived to be 80 and 90, despite what medicine claims. We haven't really extended lives at all in this recent history. I call it recent 300 years. No, it hasn't extended at all. We've one of the things that we've always done, and even back in the as we colonized this country, is we started growing crops in the same place every year. Now, if you grow gardens, you know that you can't, and you don't use artificial fertilizer, which I don't. You can't grow the same crop in the same place very long. Probably 2 years, and that's it. Even the second year, it doesn't do so well. So, one of the things that we got to learn how to do is use organic fertilizers, and put them into the soil correctly. Even turning over the soil is not a good idea sometimes. I just basically put a hole in the ground and plant a seed, cover it. We also, one of the things that we're not doing correctly in our society today is exercising. Now, if you go back and look at Dr. McCullough's site, he'll talk to you about the correct form of exercise, and I'm going to go on that in a second. But when you shake, like I was just talking about, you're actually misusing energy. So you're wasting energy, and one of the things that your body doesn't want to do is waste anything. The best way for you to get along is to make sure that your energy use is the most efficient that you can possibly have. That's the way nature works best. That's the way spirituality works best. Spirituality will not allow you to waste. It will not allow you to do things that create waste. So the more your hands shake, the more you're wasting energy, and that's counter to what I'm discussing here. One of the things that goes along with that is our society loves alcohol and caffeine. Even recently, there have been some reports that the coffee is really good for you, caffeinated coffee. And I'm telling you that it's not. Caffeine, especially when it's done with things like our new water that we're starting to come out with. We're not selling it. When you use caffeine with that water, and I've been testing it. It makes you shake like crazy, and for a minute there I thought, my God, Jim, you're getting old. Well, the fact is that what I was getting was caffeine was much more efficient at messing my body up. So, and the same thing happens with alcohol. Alcohol is a poison, and if you don't believe it, well, you know it's a poison. It doesn't actually. I don't have to go into that, but despite these popularities of these things that we do a lot, and another one is chocolate. Everybody talks about how good chocolate is for you. Well, they're not talking about chocolate. Now, I've said this before. They're not talking about chocolate. They're talking about chocolate with sugar, and anything with sugar is, if you don't avoid it, you're just as nutty as you are taking a whole lot of caffeine and drinking a lot of alcohol, because this is going to kill you. Eventually, these things all come around. They have to. So now I'm going to talk about fat conversion. And this is all part of the energy conversation. One of the reasons that I discussed taking a lot of protein in your diet, and that was years ago in my first book, and we discussed whey protein as a really good form of protein, is that it allows you to convert nitrogen at the cellular level in the form of acetyl-CoA synthetase, so that the mitochondria can use it effectively and drive the cellular energy cycle, which I've talked about also. The cellular energy cycle is the methylation cycles. There's 3 of them, and they're quite complex. If you want to, you can look up acetyl-CoA synthetase. Now, not synthesis, synthetase, and it's really complex. If it doesn't mix you up, as it did me, you're a wizard. The first step in the process that makes acetyl-CoA molecule, where it enters the mitochondria, is the ketone process. And if you go back on the web, you can find the ketonic diet, which is a high fat burning diet, and it works pretty well. It's not as good as reported by the guy that Dr. McCullough interviewed, but and he was a doctor too, by the way, and he was real crazy on it. But amino acids that make up the proteins are the only source of this nitrogen that it releases, and the nitrogen is the key issue here. And you want to get them. You want to get them in your diet, so you want to get lots of, and I do. I get every day. I eat for two heaping tablespoons of whey protein isolates, mixed in with all kinds of interesting supplements from the Nile, not Nile, from the Amazon River. You can find them on the web. I mean, you go into Amazon.com right now and you start looking at them. Such things as maca, which comes in three colors, and they go on and on. And some of them get to be rather expensive, but one of the things I've found is that if you take cocoa, it supplies you with a natural form of magnesium. Magnesium is one of the key things that you want to get into your system, and the most natural form is the best form for sure. Same way with vitamin C, with virtually all of these things. Sunshine vitamin. Sunshine is the best vitamin, not taking a pill. So glucose and carbs are quickly converted to energy and used in incorrect intervals. This is the greatest reason that we age. Sugar snaps this stuff out of you really quickly and causes you to get shaky, and the end result is we're just inefficient, and that's exactly what you don't want to have happen. We're out of control. So some certain way here are my 6 ways to increase your cellular energy conversion. First, we add to the efficiency of the cycle by increasing the mitochondrial count, and you can't do that right now. But I just got through saying that I think this is going to be a part of our change as we go through this new golden age that we're coming to. But my friend Dr. Price can actually increase your mitochondrial count by working with you in his fractal stack. He can do that. He can do a lot of things that modern medicine can't do. This is spiritual stuff. It's not technological. In a sense, it's purely spiritual. Second thing is, as I just talked about, was the high protein diet. Third, get plenty of exercise, known by as is becoming popular as interval training, and it means that you start and stop. You don't run 5 miles a day. You don't run. You know, wind sprints would be good, as we did in high school in football, but anything that where you start and stop, cause things to your muscles to move around and adjust. That's what you want. So fourth, avoid sugar totally, as much as you can. I mean, there's going to be certainly, if you eat anything from a restaurant, you're going to probably get some sugar, and you want to stay away from grains and certainly from carbs as much as you can. But you're going to have to when you get carbs, you want to get them from greens or from vegetables as much as you can. So by avoiding grains, you avoid a lot of the GMOs, which is nice. Now GMOs have a lot of interesting problems that very few people talk about. But if you listen to Dan Winter's talks, Dan Winter, I was just going over. GMO corn is really nasty stuff, but that's what they raise our livestock on. So you eat chicken, pigs, cattle, you're getting GMO in certain ways. I'm not sure how. Maybe we won't know that for a long time, but certainly it's a bad idea if you can stay away from it. Fifth, I say use high-level MSM daily, and this basically supercharges your cellular methylation cycles. There's 3 of them. I've mentioned this before. It's got 2 methyl groups in it, and those methyl groups are key to those 3 cycles. And it's also got 1 organic sulfur group in it, and that certainly supercharges one of the cycles. So it's pretty amazing stuff. A lot more amazing than anything else you're going to find anywhere. You're going to hear about anywhere else. And the 5th thing, the 6th thing, and actually I just got through saying it, is interval training. And one of the nicest forms of interval training is racket sports. And I chose tennis, but you can do just about any of them. Volleyball is a great one. So I only have 5, but 5 ways to increase your energy conversion right now. Other than getting your mitochondria count up, and call up Rich and have him treat you. One of the things he does when he treats you is he actually does that as part of the of any healing, because that allows the healing to take place quicker. And he also right now he's just only giving out his water device for people that have diseases, because that's a key to getting you healed. And I would say that if there's a sixth way to do this, it really is the water that he's going to be eventually selling. So that's it. Thanks for coming.